All right, and here we go. Well, what a couple of days it has been, and what a couple of days it is going to be. We got South Carolina coming up in just a couple of days, and I had a realization today that maybe I was not putting out enough positive energy about this election, this primary election, and maybe I wasn't putting out enough positive energy about Bernie Sanders. I want to get rid of all that negativity tonight. So welcome to the Daily Faded issue number 3. And as usual, I have to check and see. Yes, it is February 26th. I knew it was Wednesday. I didn't know it was February 26th. What an interesting fact to discover. And we've already got a viewer. That's a fantastic thing. And so I want to get all the negativity out, and I want to really make this a positive issue, and really talk about how special this moment is in our history and in our lives. It's an extremely special moment and an extremely special time. And I think we should be cognizant of it, and I think we should be respectful of it, and I think we should be happy about it. So join me, take a toke. So here's the way I see it. Bernie Sanders is the candidate of a lifetime. I was hugely inspired today by Ben Dixon and his Bernie Bruh video that went viral today, which is funny because it was trending along with We Know Joe all day long. They were like competing with each other for more tweets. Anyway, if you haven't seen the video, if you don't know who Ben Dixon is a great podcaster who I've been listening to for years. And he does a really good show. He handles both race issues and class issues from a perspective that's both academic and relatable at the same time. So I really like him. I think he's got a lot of insight. We got some sirens going on. I hope they're not coming for me. It makes me think of the old days when I was always paranoid. Anyway, the Bernie Bruh video that went out today was he had asked a bunch of his friends to send him videos about who they're voting for, and they came back. I guess they all came back Bernie, and he cut them together. Jesus, can you hear that? Life in the big city. Okay. He cut it together, and and it was all African American people. It was all friends of his, and he got a ton of videos, like 70 or 80 videos or something like that, and he cut as many of them into this 2-minute video as he possibly could, and it was very effective and very affecting, and it really got me to thinking about how special this moment is, and how special this possibility is, how special this opportunity is. The Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci said, "To tell the truth is revolutionary." And I think that's a bit of what's going on right now in the United States, is we have some truth-telling going on. And again, I'm not going to get into the negativity or the badness of what happened with the debate this week and how just sort of awful that was. But throughout it all, Bernie was a rock in telling the truth, and in saying what the problems are, what the solutions are, and how we go about taking care of it. And I think that telling the truth is a revolutionary act. There's too much caught up in the status quo, and the truth ain't one of the things that's caught up in the status quo, because the status quo's got a whole bunch of inefficiencies and overlooked people in it, and you've got to be telling yourself a lie if you think the status quo is okay. For me, I've basically, to tell you the truth, been a socialist all my life. I didn't necessarily know it the whole way. I didn't necessarily call myself a socialist the entire time. But when I was a kid, we went to Europe a bit, went to England a lot, went to Germany a lot, and saw firsthand that everyone got free healthcare and was blown away by it. Also saw firsthand that everyone gets a free education. Was blown away by that. And I understood, even as a little kid, how different that was from our system here at home. And in having those conversations with my parents when I was traveling as a kid, I found out that there were differences between socialism and communism and democratic socialism and social democracy. And really all we're trying to push for here is social democracy. I know Bernie calls it democratic socialism, and I think there's a fair argument to be made for calling it that. There's also a really fair argument to be made for just calling it what it is, which is social democracy, which exists in lots of countries around the world. But for me, as a kid, it was obvious. I mean, I grew up in a blue-collar town. I grew up surrounded by blue-collar people. My dad literally wore a blue collar to work. He was a handyman, and he wore these blue shirts with a little patch on it that said Dave the Handyman with like a hammer on it. And so I literally grew up in a blue-collar household, and my mom was a teacher, and of course teachers are the top donors to Bernie. And growing up blue collar, it was really clear to me that there was a wealth gap, that there was an inequality gap, that there were people who had more and people who had less. Now, that said, I grew up in Connecticut, and it was lily white, and so I was raised to believe in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., and I was raised to be racially, well, as good an ally on race as possible. Let's put it that way. Even though I didn't have any direct experience with race issues until I moved to LA, and then that was a whole other world opening up. But I had a good friend who lived in Berlin for years, and we joked when the Berlin Wall came down. Yes, I'm old enough to remember that, in, I believe, 1989. And there was a guy up there with long hair who was flying the European Unity flag, climbing up on the wall. And for sure, I thought that was my friend Jens. And Jens was in college forever. He just went for one graduate degree after another. And it was an amazing thing to watch, knowing that his entire education was being paid for the whole way through. And again, there it was, something that is possible in another country that just isn't possible here. Jens didn't come from any means. He didn't have the resources that it would have taken to go to, I don't know, an 8th or 9th year of college, I think that he had. And now he's a big wind power turbine engineer. He's got a great career that came out of all that schooling. And on this socialist issue, I was listening to a debate from Monday on Democracy Now! Between Marxist economist Richard Wolff and New York Times op-ed columnist, writer, whatever you call it, and also, I believe, Nobel economist Paul Krugman. And it was funny because Krugman was saying that he basically agreed with Bernie for the most part with all of his goals, But why does he have to call himself a democratic socialist? And that just hurts the movement, and it hurts the party, and it hurts this, and it hurts that. And Richard Wolff was making the argument, no, it really doesn't. Times have changed, people have changed, the younger generation has changed. People don't see the boogeyman in socialism that they used to see. And so it's all good and it's cool. And one of the things that Richard Wolff said was that, no, I'm proud to be a part of the tradition of socialism, which is a wide and varied tradition with all kinds of different strains of thought and all kinds of different interpretations, obviously all kinds of different applications around the world that we've seen in different socialist systems. And he talked about it as a point of pride. And I think the way in which Paul Krugman is wrong in saying that Bernie Sanders should label himself as a social democrat instead of as a democratic socialist, there's a problem with that. And that problem is that he's been calling himself a democratic socialist for 50 years. And to suddenly turn around and say, whoa, no, I was just kidding about the democratic socialism thing. I'm actually a social democrat. Now let's have a conversation about the difference. That would not play well. And I think the fact that he is willing to say that he's a democratic socialist, the fact that he's willing to use that word and put it all out there on the line, I think that's part of what lends to his authenticity. It's part of what makes people trust him. If he's willing to say this thing that's so awful that so many people are afraid of, but he's willing to stand by it because that's where he's at and that's where he's been, well, then that's cool. And then once you start listening to what he's talking about, it doesn't seem so bad anymore. The sting gets taken out of the socialism thing. So I do believe that so-called moderate Democrats, who, again, Bernie won in Nevada, I think they're going to come around. I don't think the democratic socialism boogeyman thing is going to be nearly as bad as people think it is. I hope you're celebrating with me. I hope you're lighting up with me, because that's the thing that we're doing tonight. Smoke and be happy and rejoice in this moment. Now, in addition to being the socialist that I've always wanted, that I've always dreamed of, Bernie Sanders is also the Democrat that I've always dreamed of. And again, it gets back to all of these key issues. It goes back to FDR. If you look at Medicare for all, you look at universal health care, that's something that goes back. It goes back to, I think, Teddy Roosevelt talked about it, a Republican, but a progressive. Definitely FDR, definitely Truman talked about it, JFK talked about it, LBJ talked about it, Jimmy Carter talked about it. It's been a rich tradition in Democratic history to try and get real, true, universal coverage, universal health care through for the American people. That's been one of our priorities as a Democratic Party for such a long time. So when people say that that's somehow divisive or it leaves out a huge chunk of the party, I actually think it brings back a huge chunk of the party. I think it brings people back into the fold. I think it makes people say, yes, this is the Democratic Party that you know and love. This is what it is that you want to be a part of. Now, for me, again, tonight's a night without negativity. So I'm not going to say anything bad about the Democratic establishment or any of that hoo-ha, not right now. This is the Democratic Party that I want to be a member of. The party that Bernie envisions, the party that AOC envisions, the party that the left is rising and pushing for. That's the Democratic Party that I want to be a part of. That's the Democratic Party that I will be so proud to be a part of once we put it back together that way. And, you know, again, that issue of waiting for this kind of Democrat, I mean, for me, again, it just goes back to so many things that I've thought and wanted over the years. I remember when Bill Clinton got elected, and I volunteered on Jerry Brown's 1992 presidential primary campaign. And then when that didn't work out, and what was he running on? Campaign finance reform. And he was raising money directly from voters using a 1-800 number. He was Bernie way before Bernie, at least in his approach and as to how he was trying to do it. But even going back to 1984 and Jesse Jackson, I was only 11 years old. I remember having political debates with a good family friend who was an older guy who my dad and I used to go fishing with all the time. And he was someone who would talk about the problems between the blacks and the Jews because he was Jewish. And let's just say he was definitely not politically correct. He did not like Jesse Jackson, was not down with Jesse Jackson. And I used to argue with him, and it pissed him off. But at the age of 11, I understood the idea of the Rainbow Coalition, and I understood what Jesse Jackson was trying to do. And in both 84 and 88, I was all about Jesse Jackson. And then I will never forget, and this, by the way, is all covered in Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People, which is a great read. It's an amazing and intimate history of the Democratic Party over the last 40 years and a history of the movements that have fed into this current not me, us movement that we're dealing with and that we're celebrating tonight. But I remember being in college the morning after Bill Clinton was elected and saying to my college roommate, there's a Democrat in the White House. After 12 years of Republicans, there's a Democrat in the White House. And God damn it, were we happy. And again, I'm not going to go negative tonight, so I'm not going to talk about my complaints about the Clinton administration. And then again, talking about the Democrat that I've been waiting for all this time. When I voted for Barack Obama in 2008, in both the primary and in the general election, I shed a tear. I'm not kidding. I shed a tear while I was voting for him. I'm a patriotic guy at heart. And, I may talk about ripping the system down sometimes, and I do. And I do think there are a lot of parts of the system that need to be ripped down. But I'm a patriotic guy, and the hope and change that Obama promised, plus the amazing achievement of voting for a black man to be president of the United States, this was truly inspiring, truly awe-inspiring. And, a lot of the hope and change didn't really come along the way that we were hoping it would. And I think now we know that we need to demand receipts. And Bernie's got the receipts because he's been fighting this fight for all this time. And that makes a huge difference. So when everyone says he's not even a Democrat, I don't buy that. For me, he's more of a Democrat than the rest of the Democrats because he adheres to these ideals that are the ideals I was raised believing are the ideals of the Democratic Party. And then on top of that, putting aside my own personal, Jesus, I'd love a socialist president. Oh my God, the ultimate Democratic president. Putting that stuff aside, just think about what so many people need right now for so many reasons. Think about healthcare. Think about how badly America needs Medicare for all. Think about how many Americans, we have 87 million underinsured or uninsured Americans, 68,000 people dying every year because they have no access to healthcare at all. We could save $500 billion a year, according to the Lancet study at Yale. There are people literally dying because of this issue. They're dying for Bernie to get elected. And I got to tell you, I'm lucky we've got good health care, but I've been waiting 3 months to get an MRI on a pinched nerve in my neck that's causing me all kinds of pain. And it's just crazy going through these hoops with the insurance company. Medicare for All does away with that. It just does away with it. And, my problems are not nearly as bad as those who are uninsured or those who absolutely can't afford their health insurance. But my family needs Medicare for All too. But how we need a Green New Deal. I mean, I've been following climate change for a long time. And by the time Al Gore's movie came out, and what was that, 2002, 2001, 2002, An Inconvenient Truth, that was a wake-up call, and I was aware of climate change. I knew about the problem, but that was a real wake-up call. And it was a wake-up call that people did not pay attention to, that people needed to pay attention to. And for decades now, we've known about climate change and we've done nothing about it. So we need a president who's going to tackle the problem head on. And the biggest and best, strongest climate plan in front of us right now is Bernie's Green New Deal plan. Immigration. Think of all the people who are suffering, the undocumented. What is it, 10, 11, 12 million undocumented living in the United States. And they are afraid to call the police if there's a crime. They're always afraid wherever they go that they're going to be found out, afraid there might be an ICE raid in their neighborhood and they might be sent to a country they don't even know. This problem, not to mention the kids in cages, not to mention the family separations, not to mention the crisis at the border. We really need to face this problem head on and deal with what the actual problem is. And then there's education. Think of all the children that need to get proper educations. Think of all the teachers that need to get real salaries. Every teacher in America making $60,000 a year or more. That's what we need, and higher education for everyone. Look, I'm saving for my kids' education right now. And, it's a pain in the ass trying to put money aside for our kids' education. Knowing that they could go to a public college tuition free, that would make a huge, huge difference. And obviously, all the people who are struggling under way too much student debt burden, let's just get rid of that student debt. It serves no purpose. All it's doing is holding people back and holding people down. Housing. We need housing for all. Minimum wage. We need to raise the minimum wage to a livable wage. So many issues. Unions. Doubling the amount of union membership. Giving people power in their lives. What it's about. It's about people being valued for their humanity, not their net worth. And the taste of this gelato, it is so sweet. And it tastes so much like Bud. It's really quite something. I'm not used to vape cartridges tasting quite like this. Not that rich. Yeah, so people being valued for their humanity, that's all we're talking about, is that people should be valued because they're people, and they should be taken care of because they're worth taking care of because they're people, and that's all it takes. So I'm totally down with that because I don't judge a person by their net worth. Hell, I don't have any income right now, and I hope someone wouldn't think less of me for it. I don't really want to get into any specific issues today. So there's one last thing that I'll mention, and I'll mention it just because it's in the news. I was thinking about this all day today, and sure enough, I was thinking about it. And this evening, Bernie tweeted a couple of tweets about it, and that's the coronavirus, or COVID-19, as they're calling it now. And I think it really demonstrates why we need Medicare for all. Because if people are unable or unwilling to go see a doctor when they start coming down with symptoms that they don't recognize, or they just think it's a flu, I don't really know what the symptoms are for coronavirus. I haven't read that much about it, but everyone's got to be able to get to a doctor. Everyone's got to be able to get to a doctor right away. If this becomes an outbreak in the United States, please, let's hope that doesn't happen. Alex Azar, and this is what Bernie Sanders tweeted about, would not say that a vaccine for the coronavirus would be made available to all Americans. How hard is it to say we're going to make it available to all Americans? And Bernie tweeted, "We need a vaccine that is available to all, not just those who can afford it. Let me be clear, it has never been more important to finally guarantee healthcare as a human right by passing Medicare for all." And he's true, and he's right. We need Medicare for all in the face of these outbreaks, in the face of these infectious diseases that keep coming up. We need to have a robust public health sector that can handle a crisis like this. So I'm feeling pretty good. You know, I don't know if we're going to win South Carolina or not. I don't think it's too important that we win. I think, you know, it would be bad if we did really bad. That could be bad. But I think we'll do well on Super Tuesday. So I'm not completely tied to the results on Saturday. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I'm even confident that we can win. But if we don't, and we move on to Super Tuesday, it shouldn't shake up the race that much if we don't get that first place in South Carolina. Anyway, that's it, guys. That's all I wanted to talk about tonight. Just one subject. And I'm not going to do a daily fail because today we are celebrating. So celebrate this moment. Just think about how we could transform this nation. Again, I keep coming back to it, where people are valued for their human value, not because of their net worth, their intrinsic human value. I want to live in a country where people are valued based on their intrinsic human value. So with that, thank you for tuning in to the Daily Faded, issue number 3. Remember tomorrow night to get faded daily with the Daily Faded. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at @the_Hetz. It's in the information box below. And subscribe, hit the notification button. And if you're so inclined, go to my Patreon page, patreon.com/thedailyfaded. I really can use your support. Thanks a lot, and I will see you tomorrow.